Good morning, everybody. Dr. Jimmy Henderson again, cognitive scientist and metaphysician. There's something been coming up over the past few weeks that I really want to talk about. Yes, I am growing a bit of a beard. I'm trying to get a Father Christmas beard before Christmas, a white one. Okay, so please excuse the look. Okay, so what I want to talk about is this issue of life after death. A lot of people are confused and don't understand, and possibly even fearful of the possibility of life after death. And I keep asking the question: is there life after death, and what would it be like? What I want to do as a cognitive scientist, I look at things using the mind and using the faculties of the mind, and especially the subconscious parts. So I'm going to use that this morning again. The first thing I want to do is actually try and give you what I call a self-evident truth about life after death. In other words, is there such a thing as life after death? And I believe that using technology and science and the mind, I've actually been able to come to a conclusion which I believe is pretty accurate, which actually proves that there must be life after death. Let me explain. We know that our brain is an electrical component. It actually operates with electricity. I mean, they can actually measure the brain waves on a machine. And in fact, there's been a recent experiment where they actually planted a electronic component into a monkey's brain, and it was able to actually control a computer game purely by its own thoughts. So that also suggests that our thinking and our consciousness has an electrical basis to it, because it's able to activate that chip and able to work the computer. So let's assume, therefore, that is the only assumption we have to do at this point, is that which is not difficult, is that our consciousness and mind has an electrical base to it. Now, for those of us that have electronic background, I do happen to have an electronics background as well, we all know that in order for current to flow in a circuit, there has to be continuity. In other words, the circuit has to be complete. Now, if we compare our consciousness to an electrical base, the fact that we are self-aware suggests that there's a continuity of consciousness. In other words, there's a cycle of consciousness which is passing through the brain and then passes on through a higher level to complete the circuit, and then back through the brain again. You're going to say, yeah, but the brain creates consciousness. No, there are arguments, well, mine as well, is that the brain doesn't create the consciousness, that the consciousness comes from a higher source. So let me come back to the analogy of the electronic circuit. So with in order for us to become self-aware, for the brain to be activated by consciousness, there has to be a completed circuit. Otherwise, we would never have become self-aware. The circuit would never be completed, and that current would never flow, and we would never have become conscious and self-aware. So there's a complete circuit, a cycle, and obviously which means even beyond death, beyond the physical brain, there's still a movement of consciousness which then recycles back. If you believe in reincarnation, it then recycles back into a later incarnation. So the very fact that we are self-aware, continuously self-aware at this moment, is a self-evident truth, obviously, suggests that there's a complete circuit of consciousness, and that we are in one area of this cycle of consciousness, and that after death our consciousness then will change form, but it still remains consciousness. As I say, those scientists, who are many obviously, and even doctors, believe that the brain generates consciousness. As a metaphysician, I say no. I think there's a higher source to consciousness, and this is where a bit of speculation comes in. But it links up with religion, and it links up with metaphysics, and it links up with my electrical theory. So let's just say that, for argument's sake, that we have a higher part to ourselves, that this consciousness I spoke about, this cycle of consciousness, actually descends to us from a higher source. Now, in psychology, we do talk of an authentic self or higher self, and in religion, we talk about the soul. I would then see a soul as a sort of an energy template for the human being, which energizes the human being. They often say that they talk of a living soul. Man is a living soul. So the soul is that higher part of oneself, or that cycle of consciousness, the higher part, which brings with it life and brings with it consciousness. And once we pass on, then the consciousness, as I say, will change to another type of consciousness, and then just continue on, or otherwise recycle them once again. So we have this situation. So what I've been saying is that the soul brings a concept of a higher energy source to the human being is not so unreasonable, and that this energy is feeding through us rather than being generated by us. It's actually feeding through, and that fits nicely with metaphysics and religion in terms of a soul. So what are we likely to experience then if we do pass through the veil of death and the brain falls away? As I said, I believe that it is a cycle of consciousness, and that our consciousness will obviously change to a certain extent, because the brain as a transformer would no longer be there. We would not have the same type of self-awareness as we have now. It would be a higher sort of soul or higher self-awareness. Exactly what that will be like, I can only speculate in terms of how the subconscious mind works. We all know that we've got the subconscious part of ourselves, which is like 80%, which we don't even know about, which is far more expansive and far more, let's use the word, wise and conscious than we are. Our subconscious is able to pick up everything that's going on around us. We're just not aware of it, because we don't need it. We only take that consciousness which is necessary. Right. So after death, we can understand that we will pass into some sort of consciousness state, which is probably more like the active, which in other words, the subconscious mind, the higher part of that cycle would then kick in. That's part of the cycle before it enters the brain. We would then return, almost like a reversal of the process. We would then return to a higher form of consciousness. And what are the characteristics of this higher form of consciousness? Well, let's look at the mind at the moment, at the brain. We have the ability to form images. We all know that. We can form an image of our house. We can create a happy space for us, or we're sitting on the beach or whatever, or going for a walk. We can actually see it in our mind. So we have the ability to create imagery. We also have concepts called synesthesia, which is not concepts, actually processes, where we can actually translate energy, one type of energy, into another. Like, let me give you an example of the blind man who can hear music in terms of color. There are many cases of people being able to translate one mode of energy, which is sound or light, into another. And we can all do it if we train our minds to do it. We can translate, we can see feelings in terms of color, and it's called synesthesia, if you want to look that up. So we also have the power to form images, and we have the power to then translate energy into forms, or into different forms. Another thing we have is pareidolia, which is another way the human mind can actually form shapes and figures out of what they call random impressions, random cues. An example of this would be the child who can look in the clouds and they can see animals in the clouds, and or maybe an adult as well can see images of animals and things in the clouds. What has happened is the mind has got that ability, because we store these memories, or schemas as they are called, of say an animal, certain animal. We have this schema, the picture of this animal in our mind, and we look at the cloud, and then our mind actually shapes the cloud in a certain way. It doesn't actually affect the cloud, but in our terms of our perception, which we know we can change perception just by taking the wrong type of drugs, we can change what we see. So in other words, the cloud is not changing shape, but the image in our minds is changing shape. And we all know that in science, that what we see outside here is just pure energy of different frequencies, and we are translating that into pictures. Right, so as you can see, the mind has got certain abilities. Even now, within the brain has certain abilities. Now, the subconscious mind is even more powerful than that. The subconscious mind, when you set your mind to it, it becomes habit. So there are powerful rules of programming that exist in the subconscious mind. So assuming that at death, that a sort of subconscious mind takes over, what we could expect is sort of a dream-like experience. Okay, we've all had lucid dreams. Lucid dreams are very useful for understanding what kind of consciousness we will probably have immediately after passing. A lucid dream is a dream that you have a certain amount of control. In other words, you're dreaming about yourself walking on the beach, and you see a shell, and you consciously decide in your dream to pick up that shell, and you're able to lean over and pick up the shell in your dream. In other words, a lucid dream is where you've got a certain amount of consciousness. Notice we're coming back to the consciousness aspect again. You have a certain amount of consciousness, and you're able to do things while you're in the dream. So you can imagine that with the passing of the brain, I would imagine that you would enter a sort of dreamlike state to start with anyway, because we have to adapt, we have to adjust to the new situation. It doesn't just happen in the flash, I don't think. We will gradually wake up, so to speak, to a new reality. Okay, and what can we expect from this reality? Well, as I said before, the brain the consciousness that passes through the brain allows us to create images. Those of us that do meditation will know that during meditation you create like a dreamlike state, and you can create anything you like, and it happens pretty instantaneously. If you want to meditate and you create a ladder, you can see the ladder and you can see yourself climbing up the ladder, and you can feel it. Actually, it becomes quite a powerful experience. So in this dreamlike state, you would have the ability to create images. And probably a much stronger ability than we have now, which is because it's been attenuated by the human neural processes, which slows everything down. But in the higher state, I would imagine that things would happen much quicker, and you could then create anything in that state. And this is why some people, why artists and others have different views of heaven and hell and purgatory. I'm using religious concepts now loosely. I'm just talking about certain states of mind and certain experiences that happen after your passing. So if you are able to create images after your passing, and very powerful images, you will technically create your own heaven. In other words, let's go back to cultural conditioning now. We've all entered the state of the passing with culture. We still have our memories, we still have cultural feelings, and which is emotional. And in other words, those who expect to see something will see that. It's as simple as that. In other words, the Norsemen who've been programmed to believe in Valhalla will actually see that happening. But they're actually creating it. They're creating their own sense of reality. So they will create their own figures. They will create themselves, recreate themselves. Interesting if we become more of a creator on our passing. They will recreate a situation for themselves, which meets their expectations in terms of culture, religious beliefs, and so on. So yes, you could very well pass into a state of a beautiful Garden of Eden, which you are creating after your passing. You have the consciousness, you have the abilities, and you do that. You could also create angels on a cloud with harps if you want to, because your mind is creating it very much like it's creating our real sense of reality now. We are translating all these energies and frequencies out there into what we see. And who is to say that it's 100% accurate? Yeah, so I can believe that that we will start creating a second reality for us, with which we are comfortable, in terms of our beliefs, in terms of our culture, and in terms of our expectations. There is one problem there, of course, not really a problem, but it does explain certain concepts like heaven and hell and purgatory. Because if you were a very violent person, full of hatred and greed and desires and very nasty, you'd first of all have those memories. Secondly, your mind would tend towards that kind of negative imagery. So on your passing, the chances are that those images you create are not going to be very nice. They're going to be linked to your memories, your past memories, possibly to guilt, to fear. So you're going to create some unpleasant images for yourself. And this could continue for quite a while, until you are able to adjust and understand what the situation is that you're in. Excuse me. The same with creating the sense of heaven. This will continue for a while until you start to realize, but hang on, this is actually an illusion which I'm creating. And then you will start letting go of this imagery, and maybe you'll see more of the essential source energy which gives rise to everything. The light, you're going to call it light, consciousness, pure energy. I call it source energy. You can call God or any concept you want to give. The source energy which gives rise to everything and creation. And we were moving closer then to that. By letting go of the imagery, we'll then move closer, and everything will become lighter and slightly different again, and we'll have to once again adjust to the new level of light and the new level of conceptualization or imagery which we are creating, until eventually the imagery falls away and we realize true consciousness, and we are become linked up with source consciousness once again. Yeah, this might be a bit long and a bit complicated, but I think it's important. And so yes, we've got the dreamlike state, we've got the imagery, we create a heaven and hell for ourselves, or purgatory. Yes, the concept of purgatory. We all have unfinished business. I think on our passing, we can't say we're going to be in a state of perfection. So we're going to still have some pain from the past and the memories and things like that. And this stuff has to be dealt with. You can't pass into higher levels of the cycle of consciousness while having this heavy baggage. You need to be free, you need to be light, you need to be energy. So therefore that has to be released. And if you can't release it on this earth, you then have to release it at the next level as well. For those who believe in reincarnation, it's simply a return of the cycle of consciousness into another body. For those who don't accept reincarnation, it won't happen. It sounds crazy, but you actually have that power there. You have the power of choice. The soul has the power of choice to either reincarnate or to continue on into the light. And so you're going to create that situation. What I mean is that unfinished business will then translate and move you to create imagery which is going to address that problem, issue. In other words, you will face challenges after your passing as well. More of an energy level, more of your own imagery, your own formation. But you need to grow through, let's say, cultivate love. So you could imagine that after your passing, you will then create scenarios in which you would have to manifest love. You'd have to generate love. And in doing that, you then pass to the next level. So all that unfinished business will have to be dealt with either now or in the next world or in the next life on earth, on whichever you accept at the soul level. So that is how the concept of purgatory comes in. In other words, your work doesn't end after death. You actually have to work on a higher level to achieve the same results as you would have achieved: the cultivation of love, the cultivation of innocence, understanding, faith, belief. In other words, to lighten the load of the past. Because in order to pass through the higher levels of the cycle, one has to, as I say, one has to be let go and has to be completely free to move to those higher levels without the baggage of the past. So I think that basically concludes my talk for this morning. To summarize very quickly, you'd probably enter a dreamlike state which you create in your own sense of reality, and if you have unfinished business, you'd have to, your scenarios would be something like a classroom, and you'd have to then work your way through those classrooms. Of course, it's all an illusion which is created in the mind, but then you ask yourself, we look around now, how much of this is an illusion? Because we all know that it's energy templates. It's not really as we see it. Well, the colors, even the colors and the forms are created in our mind. So yes, we will create our own sense of reality, and it will conform to our beliefs, expectations, level of understanding. And then eventually it will fall away, and we can move closer and closer to the light, and our understanding and consciousness will increase. So yes, I don't believe that death is anything to be feared. I think that it's just another stage, and that I hope that you can take something from this talk of mine that would give you hope for the future, and reduce your fear of death. I don't think it's something to be feared, honestly. And yeah, if you enjoyed my talk, and if you'd like to read more of my articles, I've got a blog. I've also got books out there. I'm a published author. My latest book is called Understanding Metaphysics. You can get it on my website, www.discoveringyourself.co.za, and it's also on, that book is also on takealot.com here in South Africa. So I wish you all the best, and I pray that you've gained something from this talk and that you feel a lot better. Thank you.